Welcome to Top Tier Wrestling, your ultimate destination for all things AEW and WWE. Whether you're a hardcore wrestling fanatic or just a casual viewer, we've got you covered with the latest news, in-depth show reviews, and our unfiltered opinions on everything happening in the world of professional wrestling. Join us as we dive into the high-octane action, dramatic storylines, and backstage buzz of AEW and WWE. Get ready to step into the ring with us and stay on top of the wrestling world. This is Top Tier Wrestling. Welcome, everyone, to the Top Tier Wrestling Podcast. Today, we have a little bit something different. I'm your host, Josh, with my co-host, Dawn.
Hi.
And today, today we're going to be talking not so much about the full episode of Dynamite Winter is coming, but kind of our overall impressions of AEW right now. Generally speaking, for those that really need to know, this AEW Winter is coming. Probably would be like a 7-5 neck nubs. And that's even with the returning Tony Storm, just because there's too many other elements of AEW right now that are just not firing on all cylinders. There's elements of in-ring action that have been diminishing, and there's two major storylines, like the major storylines in AEW,
Oh, goodness.
that are just incoherent at this point. And there's just too much of a dissonance between what they're trying to convey and their actual ability to have enough continuity to convey that and have it land correctly.
Yeah.
So if you were here just to kind of get the review of Dynamite, there it is. It was not top tier. It was only like a 7.0 neck nubs.
Maybe.
The bigger high spot news to know was that Tony Storm did return on the end of Mariah May and Mina Shirakawa's match. And that part was pretty cool, but there was a whole lot of other parts that were less cool. And so that's what we're going to discuss right now, as well as kind of the future of AEW and this podcast, at least for now. So if you're into it, let's get into it. Now, to kind of start things off, I guess a good way to frame it would be that we had a John Moxley Pac and Jay White Orange Cassidy thing start off right at the beginning. And this ties into the issues I have with what they're doing with the Death Riders. It seems to me that AEW is either not sure what they're doing with the Death Riders, or they're not sure how to convey what they're doing with the Death Riders. They keep trying to present them as some sort of existential threat to the entirety of AEW. But one, I've seen zero interaction with any of the EVPs or Tony Khan. Two, I don't feel like just the 5 people that make up the Death Riders right now are enough people to really present an existential threat to AEW when their roster is like hundreds of people deep. Two, I don't think the quote unquote rest of AEW is looking like they're all that damn concerned with what the Death Riders are doing. Only like 5 other people seem to give a shit, and they don't care because of whatever the Death Riders message is, which is a whole nother ball of wax. Like, I still, to this day, I don't think John Moxley has been able to just straightforwardly say what their intention is. Like, they say things like, oh, you know, people in the back not giving 100% or whatever. But a whole lot of everything about the Death Riders just doesn't land right. And getting into the reasons why and the incoherency and inconsistency of it, I think would be worth talking about.
Yeah.
Because the only people who seem to give 2 squirts of piss about what's going on with the Death Riders are just the people who would only otherwise care for the same reason that anyone ever cares, and that's because John Moxley happens to have the AEW title belt right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get that other than Orange Cassidy, that Jay White, Christian Cage, or Hangman Page give two shits about the existential threat that the Death Riders apparently, we've been told, represent to AEW writ large. They give a shit because he's got a title belt they want. That's exclusively the reason.
Yeah.
And that's reinforced by the fact that none of these men get along. There's no solidarity from the people that are opposed to John Moxley and his Death Riders. And then to reinforce it further, the way there's this kind of disconnect, there was a sit-down interview with Darby Allin and Tony Schiavone in the show where, you know, if you can get past the fact that Darby Allin supposedly punched himself in the face and made himself bleed for shock value, he goes on to say, you know, he understands why a lot of young guys don't want to get involved because this is the first time they've been able to make a living in pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And that seems like it's completely talking out of two sides of one's mouth. And I say that because that was almost exactly the reason that was given as to why people in AEW should care about whatever the Death Riders are doing.
Yeah.
Because without AEW, there would be no them. You know, all those guys who would never make it in, say, WWE to the degree that they've made it in AEW, all those young guys who for the first time are making a living in pro wrestling, those are the people that should actually, in fact, be upset by what the Death Riders are doing. So now we have Darby Allin kind of sending the opposite message. Then you couple that with FTR, who got involved last week by protecting Orange Cassidy, coming out this week, and in their 5 seconds of a blurb where they're talking about a charity thing for the hurricane that hit, the part where they reference the Death Riders, they basically said, we don't have a problem with you, but if you have a problem with us. And I'm like, what the fuck, man?
You exclusively have a problem
One,
with them.
you typically have represented Team AEW, so you should have a problem with them. One. And two, how badly do you want to continue to convey this idea that the Death Riders clearly are not that damn big of a deal? I mean, you're just reinforcing what we're already saying is a problem by saying we don't have a problem with you. That makes the Death Riders irrelevant, which was already an issue. Like, do they not see that this is an issue? That the Death Riders are presented as an existential threat that takes over all of TBS or all of the stadium or is taking over the business.
Also,
so then have their stars go, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. I thought that the young people in AEW, the young wrestlers, I thought they wanted to get involved. That's how this all started. Like, they were all lined up ready to kick some ass when they were waiting for the Death Rider truck, the Deathmobile, to show up. Like, they were all there. Like, Orange Cassidy had to tell them, like, no, you guys, like, calm down, stay back, because this guy's dangerous. You don't know. Like, that is how this all started. So now they don't want to get involved. And also, I haven't seen any of the Death Riders beat up any of this young new talent that should be afraid. They've gone and picked obscure wrestlers to beat up, or people that were in some way involved with Orange Cassidy. That's who they went after. I haven't seen them really beat up any of this young new talent.
Yeah. I mean,
or threaten them at all. Also, like, I'm not even gonna get on the Shafir thing right now, but there was something that you had said that I wanted to speak to, and it's completely left my brain. But if it comes back, I will address it if I can. But all in all, this just feels like there's no direction. I've not seen the Death Riders do anything deathly.
No.
I've seen them roll out the ring for one dude. I've seen them I've
Well,
seen
and
them all stand
yeah,
around and give somebody a kick party, just stomp on them for a little bit. They'll do that, and then they'll just roll out the ring, just like they're done.
yeah.
That'll show you guys.
No, there's only two people that they apparently seriously fucked up, and it was two people whose careers had ended for non-kayfabe reasons.
Yeah,
Daniel Bryan made it known early on in 2024 that it was his last wrestling thing. Yet they're trying to convey you ended his in-ring career. No, man, we all knew his in-ring career was coming to an end. You're just
yeah,
trying to tack this on for extra emphasis, and it just ain't landing right. Like you, and the other guy you took out was the super best friend guy whose name escapes me.
yeah.
You
I
know,
can't.
the guy who had already quit wrestling like several months before as an
Yeah,
active competitor.
we hadn't even
So,
seen him, but then he shows up just for that one episode.
yeah, yeah, and it's like they just like he was the guy in a red shirt that episode. That was it. You know, he
Yeah,
was the
so
expendable component because
I
he had already quit. It's not terribly different than if Big E can never wrestle again, having the New Day leverage that as like, oh, we told him to fuck off. No, he
yeah,
was medically told to fuck off beforehand. The
yeah,
difference is that there actually had some emotional weight with Big E because they hadn't like been signaling that that was the case for months and months prior.
yeah. I mean,
Like it
this,
was still a big question mark. Can he come back? It still kind of is, but you know, all of the reports indicate that he can't.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm trying to think of how, you know, I feel like the Death Riders, and I've said this before, this is a reboot of a story arc of an AEW takeover that started when the Young Bucks and the new version of the Elite tried to take over, and they at least, you know, uh TK driver Tony Khan and punched him in the stomach and, you know, looked like they were actually taking the show over. I mean, they're
yeah,
legitimately known to be executive vice presidents, and they were leaning into this idea that they're abusing their power. And I thought, well, there's at least something, right? Like it feels a little bit like when you had Triple H and Stephanie McMahon being the authority, when you know that they are in fact executives at that company, or
yeah,
Vince McMahon, you know, abusing his power, which is a whole lot less amusing of a character arc with what we know now. Um, where he was in fact abusing his power.
yeah,
But you see what I'm saying? Like those
yeah,
at least would track. Like you actually have some leverage because you are somebody in this company that could literally fire somebody, you know, or
yeah,
abuse your executive authority for self-aggrandization. What
yeah.
is John Moxley's take? He doesn't have he's not the biggest and baddest wrestler there. He just isn't.
No,
And he's only got four other people. I don't think the Death Riders would be able to hang if they had to deal with MVP and the Hurt Syndicate right now. They would
Mm-mm.
just get crushed.
I agree.
So I really have a hard time believing in this quote unquote existential threat from like four people that the only thing they do more often than not is cut a promo outside the building in a closet or
Farewell.
uh, a stairwell or a parking garage. And then the only other major thing I see them doing is riding in a desert in a pickup truck where they put a flare up for presumably something. What is a chopper coming?
Winter is coming.
Is and it needs a flare. It couldn't find you otherwise.
Stop, please. Oh my
I
god.
mean, it's just dumb and it's not landing. And then last night, you know, Moxley, after all of this, goes and cuts a promo where instead of looking like a badass, he looks like a jittery, like ADHD kid on cocaine.
He's just screaming and having a fit. That's
Yeah.
it.
And I'm just like, dude, nothing about this is working. Like your message is convoluted, your presentation is convoluted. You're not carrying across this I'm a badass at all.
Yeah.
And you're not you don't have a position of authority to take over AEW. Having the world title doesn't give you that authority. No matter what you think, it just makes you the guy that's relevant because you're chased for that title.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole lot of like dissonance between what you're telling me and in a lot of ways what you're showing me in the ring versus the idea you're trying to convey to us. And a lot of it coming through the announce desk, trying to just tell us what we're supposed to be interpreting this as. But we don't. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in WWE when they try and tell me, one thing, but I'm seeing a different thing in the ring. And it doesn't work here, no matter how many times you try and have Excalibur, Shivani, or Nigel McGuinness say it.
About how deadly they are? That's not working for you? You're not selling?
Nope.
Really?
Nope. It's working for me with the same degree of believability as when Wade Barrett waxes on super homosexually about freaking Dominic Mysterio being a sex symbol. It just ain't true.
You're trying to kill me today.
Well,
everything
I'm just trying to
it
point
makes me
out,
laugh, and then I cough, and then I
and
have
then you cough.
because I'm dying. Oh my god!
Not trying to do that. But I'm the reason that this bothers me, and this is among many things, but this really bothers me because this is one of the two major story arcs going on right now. I guess you could say there's a third story arc going on with Mariah May and whatnot, and it just got, I guess, supposedly more relevant with the return of Toni Storm. But I feel like, well, that's a whole nother ball of wax. I'm going to stick with the Death Riders and just move on from one to the next. But yeah, long story short, nothing about this Death Riders angle is actually landing, and it's just not working for me as one of the major story arcs. Like, I don't care at this point. Like, I really have a hard time caring about any of it because AEW's response is muted because the message is the initial threat is muted. So the whole thing just feels like a nothing burger. And it's, instead of being compelling, I just am like, I'm just waiting for us to move on from this crap so that I might see something that I want to see, maybe some good in-ring action or something that's interesting. This ain't it. And this is what you're trying to make it, and it's failing miserably.
Yeah, and they just don't. There's still no clear path. Like, and I think I said this to you earlier. At this point, I think they've been around for 2 to 3 months. The Death Riders, maybe even a little bit longer. I don't know. My brain does not hold things that it hates. But we've been doing this for a minute, and by this time, if you are a dominant faction, if you are a threat to AEW, you can't possibly be a threat with 4 or 5 people against an entire company. They got hundreds. You should be recruiting. I mean, they continuously play that portion of John Moxley's initial promo about the Death Riders before it had no name. Basically, where he says, come with us if you want, or if not, then start running or whatever, that thing. They play that over and over. So clearly that's supposed to have some relevance to the Death Riders.
Yeah.
But where's the recruitment?
Yeah.
Like, all this hot new young talent. Hold on. All this hot talent, right? That's afraid to get involved now. Well, why aren't they going after them? Why aren't they going after these impressionable youths that apparently are housed at AEW like it's a fucking orphanage? Why aren't they going to them and going, "Hey, you want to be dominant? You want to be a part of a strong faction of a group of people that got your back? Then you need to join the Death Riders. AEW ain't got nothing for you. This is where you need to be." Why aren't they doing that? Because at this point, we should have at least one person. It should be that there's a match that happens where John Moxley's going for the belt, or somebody's going for John Moxley's belt, like let's say Orange Cassidy, right? And Orange Cassidy's about to win, and then somebody comes out in a hoodie and they attack Orange Cassidy, and he loses. And then we find out that, oh, there's a new member, like Hook has joined the Death Riders.
Yeah.
Instead, they have Hook attached to this stupid, I'm so sorry, this patriarch bullshit. Listen, I love me Christian Cage. Christian Cage, you're great, okay? I got no problem with him. He does a great job as a heel. Oh, I know. I mean, he does his character well, is what I'm saying. They give him shit. He works with what he's got. Okay, so the patriarchy, like that whole thing, it's funny. It's cool. I get it. But even he is doing more recruiting than the Death Riders.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. They picked up Kip Sabian.
Yeah.
And that's less recruiting and almost like replacement, since Luchasaurus apparently is out injured indefinitely with pneumonia or something.
Yeah.
I was looking online just now, and I think I can answer your question, like how long have we been dealing with the Death Riders?
Mm-hmm.
There's a post on our wrestling Reddit from 27 days ago asking, now that we're in it almost 3 months on the faction, what do we think of the Death Riders as the top heel faction in AEW? Goodness. So they've been at this for almost 4 months now. If this was posted 27 days ago and they were at 3 months then. So 4 months in, and it feels like it was only like maybe a couple weeks ago that they even settled on calling themselves the Death Riders. Because prior to that, people were like, are they still the BCC? And that's what I mean. Like, when the NWO took over WCW, they came with the New World Order quick. Like, they were like, here's our name. We've come to disrupt this place. We're taking over. And they did. Meanwhile, the Death Riders just came up with a damn name like a couple weeks ago, it feels like. And it's like, your message has been convoluted, watered down, and this doesn't feel like a takeover. If anything, this feels like you picked up a failed takeover story arc with the Elite, only to still fail it 4 months later.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they're going with the Death Riders. The only place it seems to have gone is to, you've got John Moxley having interviews outside of AEW where he's like so annoyed that somebody said something about like, well, what's it matter? He's bottom card anyway. Well, if you have this great love for the bottom of the card, why is the only significant thing the Death Riders, which exclusively is your brainchild from what we understand, John Moxley, why is the only thing of import that they've done is the Daniel Bryan retirement angle and put the strap back on you to basically be held hostage? I mean, it seems entirely self-aggrandizing. It doesn't feel like you're doing this for the angle. It looks, at least from the outside, like this is just you trying to maintain John Moxley relevance. Like, you don't have a story. You just wanted an angle to get the belt back on you to keep you relevant in the zeitgeist of AEW.
I mean, it looks to me like you are actually doing what people have accused Chris Jericho of doing.
Well, and it looks antithetical to this idea of you having a problem with anything bottom card being treated like it's the bottom of the card when you only hang out at the top of the card.
Yeah.
So, and only deal with top of the card guys, so
like, again, at this point, Daniel Garcia, hey, you got a belt, you should join Death Rider faction. You're new. Like not new, but you're young. You're hot talent right now, man. You should be like MVP. You see how they're recruiting? Like honestly, what are we doing with the Death Riders? Like what? It makes my soul hurt. Now, it makes my soul hurt.
To be fair, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and it looked like that's what they were doing. They started out doing that with Yuta, only to make him a bitch boy again, though. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Two things real quick, because I don't want to move so far past it that I can't recall what you were saying. But To be fair, MVP has only given the impression of recruiting. He's only got the guys in the Hurt Syndicate that he ever wanted in the Hurt Syndicate as of this moment. But at least he's given the impression of recruiting. Him and Don Callis both recruiting. Don Callis has probably done the most recruiting of anyone, to be perfectly honest, of any faction guy. As much as I like calling him the human thumb, his Don Callis family is actually a faction worth watching and is interesting right now.
Yes,
Same with
I
MVP
agree.
and the Hurt Syndicate, who, though they haven't recruited anybody, they've at least put the idea out there for recruitment. People have been handed MVP cards. People still reference the cards in the story. Like,
They've had interviews where they have mentioned, because they have said that they wanted a young guy, a younger talent to join in that interview. Like, so I think they are going to, and I don't know when it's gonna play out. But like you said, at least they're giving, you're seeing them talking about it, referencing it. Like, you see the card. Just last night we saw Ricochet reference the card. So yeah, it's still a thing.
yep. So it's already carried more, like, at least narrative weight.
Yeah,
Whereas the Death Riders have said on a couple of occasions, if you're not with us, get the hell out the way. And if you are, come along. And it's like, well, so you've drawn a battle line, but I haven't seen anybody step on any kind of side.
yeah,
I really don't feel like AEW has committed to this angle being as, like, company wide as
yeah.
they say they want it to be. Because if it was, we would see them intruding on everything,
Yep.
everywhere that's significant in the least.
But they
Every
can't though.
title match, and they would present you with an option. It's like either join us or get destroyed by us. Those are your two options.
Yeah,
And that would make me feel like this is a legitimate takeover, but it's like AEW doesn't want to commit to that. They don't want it to interrupt, like, Mariah May's story angle with, Tony Storm. They
yeah.
don't want it to interfere with, and I'm just using the women here as an example, but we can go down the list. They don't want it to seemingly interfere with Daniel Garcia's first kind of big title run. They
But it
don't seem
should.
that's what I'm agreeing. I'm just giving the
Yeah,
examples.
yeah, yeah.
They're not messing with the girl who has two titles in Mercedes Moné. Why aren't you
Yeah.
recruiting some of these powerful women or having Marina Shafir destroy them? You're not putting your fingers in enough pies to make me believe that this is the existential threat to AEW that you're trying to have people like Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy convince us it
Yeah.
is.
You want to make that interesting? Like, I honestly think it would have been cool to make Statlander a part of Death Riders.
Well,
Like,
Statlander was mid heel turn. I agree with you, by the way, but she was mid heel turn when they pulled her
that's
completely out and used.
yes, yes, yeah. You're taking the words right out of my mouth.
Then
Uh,
I'll let you say it. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to steal your thunder.
no, but I'm absolutely agreeing. Yes, that's what they should have done. Statlander was already about to go heel. And then her and Stokely just, I don't know, broke up or some shit. I don't know. And now I don't even know. I'm yeah, Stokely. I don't even know where he is.
No, we haven't. We saw Stokely breathing down the necks of Private Party for 2 seconds and then just disappeared.
Yeah. So on that, but I mean, she was already there at a little heel turn. We could have just had her join right on up with the Death Riders. And then you got two dominant females in that particular faction. They go after other females with belts in AEW. Boom, more gold. So now you got two dominant chicks. You got dominant dudes, and you got Wheeler Yuta, who could have been the guy that you send out to handle your lightweight, no pun intended. But people like Daniel Garcia join the faction. You won't? Okay. In your match or during your match, Yuta's gonna come in and fuck some shit up.
Yeah.
Jack Perry, we want your belt. We can't have it. All right, Daniel Garcia, you can't have that belt either. Like neither one of you can have that belt. That's Wheeler Yuta's belt. And then he's gonna come in and wreck some shop, and you guys either need to join up with this faction or continue getting wrecked. No,
Yeah.
I,
No, they need to be doing all of that. They need to be putting their fingers in all those pies. Why isn't John Moxley recruiting aggressively? Why isn't he recruiting at least 2 or 3 more women to go after all the different female titles? Why isn't he, having conversations with guys like Don Callis and seeing if they can make an arrangement to have the Callis family and the Death Riders coexist?
why is
Any of that stuff. And that's what I mean. They wanted this to be like a broad, writ large takeover, but they're too afraid of having the Death Riders take over or put their fingers in already existing story arcs.
why is Julia Hart coming back and not going after Shafir or vice versa? So Julia Hart's coming back, but she wants oh my god,
Jamie Hayter.
she wants Hater. Okay, so she comes back. She gets involved in Hater's business, and then Shafir comes in and wrecks shop. I like that. That sounds cool.
Well,
Like,
I mean, you're addressing a couple of different weird points. One, here's the problem with that I see it. Why would they give a shit about Marina Shafir? She's not a title holder.
that's exactly my point.
And
She needs to insert herself in that.
That goes, I agree. And that goes even further to why is Julia Hart at all interested in Jamie Hayter?
Yeah.
When Julia Hart was taken out of action, she was, before she dropped the belt, the women's title holder. So why would she come back after anything other than getting her belt back?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why target Jamie Hayter? I don't understand why anybody is like specifically returning and targeting Jamie Hayter, who was out for like nearly 2 years
Like,
and has
I guess.
come back and doesn't have an ounce of gold.
Yeah, they're
Like,
trying to give her something to do.
exactly. It's
Willow's
just
around.
busy work.
Well, how about give oh my god, I just said her name and it just left my head. Willow. Give Willow something to do too. Her and Hater could have some matches. Like, I don't even know where she is. She came out to fight against Shafir once, and now she's gone again, doing
And
who knows what.
I could see Julia Hart taking a shot at Marina Shafir because if I were to put together the forces of AEW that would stand against Moxley and his Death Riders, I would have the House of Black on AEW's side because
I mean, I've said it so many times.
they're turning the House of Black into a face faction.
Yep.
And the House of Black, I think, could do some brutal shit to stand against the Death Riders.
I think they are. I don't know what they're doing with Julia though, because she's just randomly going after Hater.
No, I agree. That's my point. It would make more sense the way I'm
Yeah.
describing it and
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
we're suggesting than what they are actually doing.
Yeah. Makes no sense.
But I would have teams like I would have everybody who's basically a heel start working their way towards the Death Riders and make one giant consolidated Death Rider faction out of all of them. And I would have everybody who's basically faces be Team AEW. And then you've got this wonderful rift. And it would be a split that is sensible because it's like, oh, well, all the heels are on one side and all the faces are on the other. And then when somebody betrays one or the other of those two factions by either doing a face thing and then joining Team AEW and everyone's like, yeah, or someone who we thought was solid on AEW's side, turning tail to join the dark side, we'd be like, boo, you villain. That would be great instead of the inconsequential, incoherent mess that it is now.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're not going to do that, then you should just drop this shit because it's shit now. And it's had 4 months. It's had 4 months of not landing already. And it's like, dude, this is just it's like you're doubling down on it sucking instead of trying to fix it fast enough.
Yeah.
And speaking of doubling down on it sucking, My next major issue is with the story arc involving
Oh,
MJF and Adam
ah.
Cole.
And
Could
now for some reason, Kyle O'Reilly.
Yeah, instead of the path of reason, which would have been to kind of try to make it make sense because it was convoluted that Adam Cole was the bad guy who turned on MJF. Then MJF comes back the face. Then 5 seconds later, he goes away and comes back again. This dude's making more comebacks than anyone. And now he's the heel again, going after Danny Garcia. And now Adam Cole comes back and suddenly he's the de facto face because MJF is a heel now. So if you oppose him, obviously you must be the face, right? Um, and nobody tried to make that make sense. And now instead of attempting to, they are just making it more convoluted by having it was confused here as well because Adam Cole, when he came back, said, I'm going to do it alone. And then, like, a week later, the Kingdom comes out and says, no, you're not. And then Roderick Strong and his friends, like, it seems like all of Adam Cole's friends, if they're not in MJF's pocket, they might as well be because all they're doing
Seriously.
is presenting themselves as obstacles to
Yep.
Adam Cole getting to MJF.
Yeah.
And with friends like that, who needs fucking enemies?
Yep.
And none of their motivations make an ounce of freaking sense. I mean, at least Roderick Strong seemed like he was, just as zealous to get his hands on MJF as the rest of them. And that's not that weird. But it was weird that, I mean, it was a weird way to put an obstacle in the path, but at least that made more sense than whatever the shit is going on with Kyle O'Reilly, who, for the longest time, didn't want anything to do with any of them. Like, he specifically made it known to Adam Cole and the Kingdom and all of them, I'm not interested, I want to do my own thing. And now all he seems to be interested in, forgetting that he was ever part of the conglomeration and could be part of AEW standing against the Death Riders, now all he wants to do is get involved in Adam Cole and the Kingdom's business and blame them for everything that MJF is doing. It's so fucking stupid and convoluted at this point that
Yeah.
this is going to go down in history as the worst failure on what had been an otherwise successful arc between Adam Cole and MJF prior, that the follow-up has bombed out as bad as it's done. I
Yeah.
mean, this thing is a fucking mess. It is
The only
incoherent, inconsistent. No one's motivations make sense. And I guess the hand wave is like, oh, it's just a dumb pro wrestling story arc. I guess so.
I
I guess
guess,
that's
yeah.
all they ever wanted it to be.
Yeah, I guess so. Um this okay, so Kyle O'Reilly being a part of this is quite possibly the dumbest. Like, I thought that this couldn't get any dumber.
But wait, hold my beer.
Yeah, and I'm just waiting for the opportunity that they're going to have something pop up from the past or something pop up where MJF was going to stab Adam Cole in the back or something, and we just like here's the proof. I'm just waiting for that. But still, to this date, that doesn't exist. We don't have that proof yet. If you were trying to switch this heel face thing back around to where it was, before they became super best friends, then you done fucked up. You've like the easiest way to have done that was to just have like some footage or something where MJF did something where he was gonna stab Adam, something that would have fixed his entire storyline, and we would have been like, oh, okay, damn it, MJF. Instead, you've doubled down on the fact that there's still no proof that MJF was going to do anything to Adam, and now you've added somebody who is so inconsequential in this particular storyline that it's confusing he's here. Like, he's blaming Adam Cole for the injuries that Roderick Strong received at the hands of it. Roderick pick that
Incidentally,
match.
yeah, exactly. And you're right. You're dead on right.
I'm
Like
so
Adam Cole
confused.
initially came back saying I'm going to do it alone, and then the Undisputed Kingdom's all like, "No, you don't have to." So Adam Cole's friends insert themselves into Adam Cole's issue,
So
and
not
then
only
you
are
want
they
to blame
standing in the
Adam
way,
Cole for
yes,
that fallout from them doing so.
yeah, not only are you
It's
standing
so
in the way
stupid.
of what he wants, but you're now blaming him for going after what he wants and you helping him and then getting injured. What?
Yeah, no, it's idiotic
So
at this
it's
point.
yeah, and
It's
this
descended into absurdity instead of going in any route to try and make it make sense.
I think this one is more offensive to me than the Death Rider storyline because I really enjoyed what was happening with Adam Cole and MJF before this. Did I okay, so they got to a point where MJF was like they didn't understand that he could be uh a sneaky face. Like they didn't like they I don't know how to put it, but at some point they just started making him goofy. Okay, so his face turn wasn't very comfortable towards the end. All right, like I was like, okay, what's happening? Like it was just, it was, and maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. But before that, the storyline that they had between him and Adam, it was just perfect. Okay, like they had a nice little groove here, and they could have done it where they eventually got into it because they wanted, like, I want this belt, no, I want this belt, and then they end up having like their fights and then realizing, well, we're just gonna have to be like friends but enemies at the same time, and then just walking away from their quote unquote friendship but still being like playful rivals or some shit. They could have done it that way. Nope. Nope. It's like they've never seen a sitcom from the 80s. Like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so this one especially bothers me because, and also this is a storyline that made me like MJF. I could not stand MJ. Like his, I never
Yeah.
thought he was funny. I never thought his insults were that clever. I mean, he's always been like, listen, he's always been a charming person. Like I get the vibe. I understand what people like about him. But his type of like comedy just isn't my cup of tea, and I put him more along the lines of an insult comic, like Andrew Dice Clay or Lisa Lampanelli, something like that. And I don't hate them. I don't. It's just not my kind of like. It's not my
Well,
kind of humor. So
yeah.
whenever I saw him doing his his shtick, like signing stuff and like being rude to people and kid, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. But like, it's really to me, it's just as bad as me doing a mom joke every time we open up every time we open up the
Yeah.
podcast.
Well,
Like
I
it.
I think they're funny, but I mean, with MJF, some of his stuff is hit or miss. Like
Yeah,
sometimes he is genuinely clever, and other times it descends into the lowest form of
yeah.
like third grade. You're a poopy head kind of level crap. And then he tries to salvage it by just trying to use as much cursing and slang as he can. um
Yeah, yeah. I
like I thought it was pretty clever and funny when he was making fun of Takeshita and called him take a shitta. I'm like, okay, that's a little clever, right? You
it was.
giggle
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
But like some of the other stuff is just dumb. And like the last big promo that he cut, like big promo, not, I'm here for 5 minutes to say I'll see you at the Dynamite dozen battle, whatever. Um, was his big promo on Roderick Strong, which wasn't the
Oh,
flex he thought it was. It's like, so
hey, you
basically
came
you're
from a
just
bad
telling me,
place, and
yeah, you're
now you're
just telling me
awesome.
that Roderick Strong worked his way up from the bottom against a lot of adversity. You've basically put him over instead of bury him,
Yeah.
and if that was your intention, well, score, but you in kayfabe aren't supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be trying to make us feel like you're going to obliterate Roderick Strong. Instead, you gave him an inspirational tale.
God, please.
What? What did I say?
Oh my god, the inspirational tale. Oh yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
mean,
Now you're
he
his hype
was.
man.
Yeah,
Seriously, now.
like you're his inadvertent hype man, and so it's
Yeah,
like, okay,
like
um,
I swear to Christ, he was saying that, and I'm like, oh shit, Roderick's a badass.
yeah. So I
Thanks,
mean, it wasn't.
MJF.
It really wasn't the like flex that he came from a bad background and has pulled himself up essentially against all odds by his own bootstraps and effort.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my
That's
god.
actually that's not a flex, dude.
Like he's talking, and he's making that face like, ha ha, you were poor, and now you're a wrestler, and I'm like, awesome. Roderick
So
sounds fucking cool.
no, I I agree that MJF is a great talent. Like he is
Yeah.
one
Oh
of the
my god.
best in
Yeah.
AEW. I'm
Yep.
just saying not everything that comes out of his mouth or everything he does is gold. And um and I don't know how they can salvage whatever is happening with this storyline between him and Adam Cole at this point.
Yeah.
It's just confused and convoluted. And I'm kind of ready for them to have it out and be done with it so we can all move the fuck on from this abortion,
I would love that.
because that's what it's turned into. Like they have seriously tanked whatever was good about their best friends angle and the big betrayal. They weren't able to capitalize on. They did not.
Yeah.
And I know both wrestlers were very injured, and so you had to work with what you had to work with. But honestly, it would have been fine if honestly it would have been fine if they had left it at MJF seeing Adam Cole in the ring and giving him one major kick to the balls and call that a day,
Yep.
because you weren't able to pick it up and run with the ball beyond that point. We've
Yeah.
gotten to here where it's the most confusing and incoherent, inconsistent piece of crap I've ever seen in any storyline. Well, now that's not true. Mark Henry, oh, what was the older gal wrestler's name? I can't think of her, but there was a storyline where Mark Henry apparently made an old lady pregnant and she gave birth to a hand in WWE. So you can't take the cake as the worst wrestling storyline, but you are being compared to Mark Henry knocking up Mae Young, I think was her name, and her having given birth to a hand. So you're in that league.
That league, buddy. Wow. Yeah. Um. I feel like the Kyle O'Reilly being added to this has got to be the dumbest move. It's almost as if they thought they had nothing for Kyle O'Reilly to do, while there is a faction threatening someone that's in the conglomeration, which he's supposed to be a part of.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't know what's even going on with the conglomeration.
no,
Kyle
because
O'Reilly
I've
apparently has,
seen Orange Cassidy get his ass beat, and none of his folks really come out to help
yeah,
or
none of the
do anything.
conglomeration shows up. So they don't seem very conglomerated, I guess is my point, because you got
Yeah.
Kyle O'Reilly running off to interfere in business that he very overtly stated he didn't want anything to do with when he made his comeback
Yep.
only a few months seemingly ago, or at least earlier this year sometime. And now he's deeply interested and in weird ways that don't make any fucking sense. And so the conglomeration, as far as I can tell, has fallen apart. Because what is it now? It's just Mark Briscoe, Ishii, and Rocky Romero.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but I mean, I'd rather Mark Briscoe just be by himself, because
Yep.
the last time I saw Ishii in the ring, it was fucking atrocious. It was nothing but a stupid slap fest with Jericho, one of the worst matches I've ever seen. Second only to the one with Suzuki that was just nothing but a damn slap fest with Jericho.
Yeah.
That shit's fucking terrible. I don't know who that's for or who's into that, but you're bad and wrong, and you should go sit in a corner and think about what you did, because that is boring as hell, and it's antithetical to everything that pro wrestling is trying to do, which is to have big moves that look devastating but are not in fact that damaging, that the guys can get up and walk away and perform again the next night.
Yeah.
This are shitty moves that don't look that good, but you're actually slapping the crap out of one another. So you're invoking a lot of damage for little to no payoff. Like, it's the
Yeah.
opposite of, say, like what Jackie Chan ever wanted was, I'm going to do something crazy and I want you to film it, because if I accidentally die, I'm trying not to die, but if I die, I want you to catch it on film and make it worth something. This is totally the opposite of that. This is nothing but damaging your stars and causing them injury for no payoff at all. It's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong.
And I don't know if that's what they call Japanese strong style, and maybe that's why we see all of these Japanese guys who do nothing but no sell strikes, which is super fucking old and boring as well. But I'm just not here for it. Maybe that's a fair assessment, is that I think strong style is completely fucking stupid if that's what strong style is, and it's not
Yeah.
for me.
Yep.
Because I'll readily admit there are some styles of pro wrestling that are not for me. Boring ass, nothing but arm twisting and leg locking technical matches are what they call technical, are not for me either. It's why I'm not the world's biggest fan of Danny Garcia these days, and why I wasn't a huge fan of Bryan Danielson's in-ring work
Yeah.
either. Because a lot of those matches are just like one long rest hold and a bunch of fake strikes. I came to see people grapple. I want to see the big wrestling moves or the high flying spots, not people that just want to twist each other's arm for 5 fucking thousand years,
Yeah.
or
Real
just
talk.
do no sell titty slaps for 20 minutes in a row back to back.
Yep.
On that subject of like in-ring crap that goes on in AEW that needs to be brought to a halt, extremely protracted strike battles are the new rest hold in AEW. They need to
Yeah.
like cut that down a bit, because it just gets overly repetitive. A little bit here and there, cool, but like there's no sense of moderation on that stuff in AEW. They just do it a lot, a lot, a lot. Like it's basically camouflage for it being a new rest hold. Um, the other thing, and this extends unfortunately specifically to Claudio Castagnoli's performance in ring the last two matches I saw. Um, Claudio has always had a history of like repeating too many moves too much. And that seems exacerbated in those last two matches, because on top of overly using the European uppercut, he has now taken to the standing shoulder breaker like a fish to water, where
Yeah.
all he is doing in the last two matches, and those last two matches were against Brody King and Will Ospreay. And I get that in the kayfabe, Brody King at some point had an issue happen to his hand, and that Will Ospreay just recently told Kyle Fletcher that because of the way you drop me on my neck, I can't hardly feel my hand. And I'm like, well, then somebody attacking this hand you can't hardly feel shouldn't make much of a difference.
Yeah.
But all it resulted in was that like a huge portion of Claudio's performance in both of these matches was just him incessantly utilizing the standing shoulder breaker to the point where it just looks like he's flapping a dude's arm up and down, and that's supposed to hurt him somehow. Like, it's sad, and it makes for a really pathetic in-ring performance. It's not interesting to watch.
Nope.
And this is what I'm trying to convey about all of those prior criticisms. Watching two dudes just do titty slaps or face slaps to one another for 20 minutes straight is not entertaining. It's boring as hell. Show me pile drivers and power bombs and suplexes and avalanche moves and shit like that we can't see elsewhere. Like, if I want to watch two dudes titty slap one another, or basically slap fight, that's what boxing exists for, right? If I want to watch somebody throw on submissions that will get a tap out in like 2 fucking seconds, that's what the UFC exists for.
Yeah.
Here in pro wrestling, I watch guys slap each other for 90 minutes, or what feels like 90 minutes straight. It's usually 20 minutes, and they're trying to push that time limit with boring crap. That's another big criticism that I'll address in just a second. But I'm not here watching pro wrestling to see that crap. The fake strikes and the fake submissions are two of the things that are the most fake in pro wrestling. Whereas somebody getting slammed to the mat or somebody diving off of the top rope, you can't fake gravity, so that shit still looks like it's badass. But me knowing that you are not, in fact, punching anyone, because if boxing has taught us anything, it doesn't take 84 punches to knock a dude out. It takes one real good one straight to the face.
Yeah.
And if the UFC has taught us anything about submissions, nobody's going to sit in a submission for 40 seconds while they eventually can drag themselves to the rope if it's a submission that's doing a damn thing.
Yeah.
A sleeper will put somebody out on their ass in about 20 seconds, maybe less if you're really squeezing it tight. And, you also consider that these dudes are doing deeply cardiovascular things where they're already in oxygen debt. It probably wouldn't take that long. And any kind of arm bar or any kind of leg bar or anything like that will get a tap out in mere seconds, not sitting there working it. So we all know, and it's never been more obvious to anybody with eyeballs since we see the UFC, we see boxing, we have all of this in our face all the time, that strikes and submissions are total bullshit. It really does, at this point, yank out my willing suspension of disbelief, and it tells me in explicit terms that these are two dudes just play fighting in a ring, much more so than the suplexes and the body slams and the, flips off the top rope do.
Yeah.
So whole matches that are nothing but that shit, which is this technical matches that Garcia and Bryan used to do, and this strong style bullshit that like Ishii and Chibata and pretty much everybody from Japan is coming over doing, is ass cheeks. It's fucking awful. It makes for long and really boring and pointless fucking matches that are just long for the sake of being long.
Yeah,
they're not interesting.
It's booty. Like, and for the full on booty.
On the subject of long matches that are long for the sake of long, this is another sin that I've seen committed recently. I get that these Continental Classic matches are given a 20-minute time limit. Mm-hmm. The only reason we need to go anywhere near the 20-minute time limit is if there's 20 minutes worth of like in-ring material that these two wrestlers have, not if it's 20 minutes of throwing guys out of the ring just to wait for them to get back in, 20 minutes of twisting each other's arms in like stupid, pointless ways.
Yeah.
It's like putting a stand-up comic who only has 5 minutes worth of material on the stage for a half hour. It's gonna suck.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like that's happening a little too often with matches of late in AEW. And I'm sorry, if AEW has one leg up on the competition in the pro wrestling world, it's with their in-ring action. And if that starts to suffer, well, between your crappy fucking storylines, what's the draw, man?
Yeah.
And I say that as somebody who, part of the reason I wanted to do a wrestling podcast is there is a lot of unilateral hatred for AEW even existing on the planet. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be, because I've seen enough there to know that there's an unpolished diamond in AEW. There's enough raw talent, and I've seen enough major high spots in major matches to know that if they can get firing on all cylinders, this challenger brand is really something amazing. And so the unilateral hatred for AEW and not wanting to buy into that and wanting to offer a different perspective was part of my motivation for wanting to do a wrestling podcast for Top Tier.
Yeah.
And it kills me that right now AEW is indefensible in some of these areas. It freaking hurts me because they can be so good when they want to be. And it just gives nothing but ammunition to the blind haters of AEW. And it makes it hard for me who wanted to defend AEW to be able to defend them, because all I have right now are major criticisms.
Yeah. Like I can't even for me it's the contradictions that I'm just seeing. And I know it's like, it's a wrestling show, bro. Calm down. I'm calm. I know. But it's the contradictions for me. It's kind of hard for me to look past. Like even with Mariah May and Tony Storm. So she has her little match with Mina Shirakawa. And of course, Mina does not win. I was not expecting Mina to win. I don't think anybody was expecting Mina to win, no matter how much heat they tried to put on this. The match is over, and then Tony Storm's music cuts on, and she comes out, old school Tony. She comes out, and the audience is losing their shit, and they're cutting to Mariah May's face, which looks just like she looks like she's seen a ghost. She's freaking out. She has no idea what to do. She goes backstage and then cuts a promo about not giving a fuck about Tony B. What? We just saw you look visibly frightened that Tony was back, and now your promo is you're a badass and you don't care. I can't, and that's what I was thinking when I saw the promo that she cut. I couldn't take the image of her looking visibly frightened out of my head while she immediately goes backstage to cut a promo about being awesome, and she's being like she's the reality of it. You don't care about Toni Storm being back, but then you look like you shit several kittens when she came back. And I wish the camera didn't zoom in on your dumb face, because then I would be able to believe the story about you being unbothered. Like when Britt Baker saw Serena Deeb come out and she goes, "Nobody cares. Nobody cares." Yeah, and so then Serena Deeb wore a t-shirt the next time we saw her that says "Nobody cares." Funny as hell, but I mean that's a story, like that storyline there. I saw it play out. I could see where it came from. You standing in the ring, looking like you just saw a ghost, looking like somebody in a Scooby-Doo cartoon, and then immediately going backstage and being asked what you feel about it, and going, "Give a shit about Tony's got," like, yeah, you do though, because you just fucking but we saw you give a shit though. Oh, okay. Well, cool. I guess you had time to think about it on your way up the ramp. And whilst thinking about it, you're like, "Wait a minute. I don't give a shit about Tony being back. And if they ask me, I'm going to say that." I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too hard on it. Maybe. But it was just, it stood out because the entire episode of Dynamite last night was nothing but contradictions. It was somebody said one thing and then immediately does something else or says something else. And that's like, that's it. You're telling me Jon Moxley and the Death Riders are a faction to be concerned about, and yet no one seems to be very concerned about this faction.
Yep.
You tell me that Jon Moxley is dangerous, and yet he needs 4 dudes and a woman to protect him. That doesn't. I mean, that's okay.
Yep.
Sure. You tell me that the Death Riders themselves are taking over AEW, and yet we still have matches that have people that have nothing to do with Death Riders. Why is Mariah May and Mina Shirakawa able to have a match? Fuck that shit. Ain't no matches happen. That's my belt. That should be what God, Shafir should be thinking. I mean,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It should be that the Death Riders are approaching everybody with an ounce of gold and
everybody.
saying, "Join or be destroyed."
If it's not a continental classic that people can't interfere in, then I should see your little faces every single time people get into that ring. I should see at least 2 new members of this faction that's taking over AEW.
Yeah,
Um,
and you know what says
Not Max Caster. No, the dude from the Acclaimed,
Max Caster or
Max. Yeah, Max
Bowens,
Caster. No, not
Anthony
Bowens.
Bowens,
Not Anthony. Max Caster. That's right. Max Caster has been teasing joining up with some faction. Um, so has the little dude.
Leo Rush.
Thank you. Seriously, but like, what's the teasing about? We got factions. Let's get going. Get
Yeah,
set up right now.
I mean, draw the
Because
battle lines.
there's
I
a
mean,
war coming. John Moxley and the Death
yeah,
Riders mean to take AEW over. We need to pull all this other shit aside. Let's join forces and get on the good foot now because these dudes are coming. No,
yeah,
you're just gonna make them
and
look goofy. Kick somebody in the ring about 8 times and then leave.
yeah. I mean, I can't agree with you more. Like, if I'm expected to believe that they're taking over, then take the fuck over. They should be intruding on every single title match and going to every single champion and saying join or die. And if they're not, then they're not taking over. And another thing that would help with this idea of a takeover is if they blew in, like, everyone's respecting that the Continental Classic has these rules that no one can be at ringside.
That's
Well,
right.
what somebody who's taking over does? They say, fuck, the rules don't apply to me. So this is the kind of shit we need to be seeing out of the Death Riders. If they want to take over AEW, then damn well do so. Otherwise, you're just talking out your ass, which
How
is, I
about
think, the summary of the problem here.
Yeah. How about when Claudio and Will Ospreay were having their match? How about the Death Riders come out and stand by the commentators, and like if they say anything they don't like, how about giving them a little,
Yeah,
a
something.
little business? How about
Stand at the
taking the
ready
mic
to
from
interfere.
somebody? How about somebody taking the mic from somebody and just talking some shit or whatever? Why not? Well, why can't you do
Yeah.
that? This is your show now, right?
And I agree with all of those things. I mean, these are great ideas, but this is stuff that AEW needs to do. Like,
Yeah.
in order to convey this idea, you're either committed to it or you're not. And so far, from what I'm seeing, you're not.
Yeah.
And yet, this is one of your major through lines. Like, as near
Well,
as I can tell, there's about 3 major giant story arcs that you're working with.
yeah.
The reason that MJF and Adam Cole is of any consequence now is because of the events in the storyline earlier. At this point, it's just retarded. But if it's one of the major ones that you're working with, then make it good. The Death Riders clearly are picking up where the Elite left off with this attempted takeover of AEW. Well, if they're taking
Yeah.
over, then I need to see them taking over. I feel like I saw Xavier Woods do more of a takeover by stealing the cameraman's camera than I've seen from the Death Riders.
Yeah, I mean, the the Young Bucks did more of a takeover when they took over the show, and no, like, we're not gonna have that promo.
And
We're
we're
gonna take
running
that
it.
promo
Yeah.
out. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
exactly.
better angle than man.
Yeah, I'm not seeing you take over anything but television time that you're squandering, is what I'm seeing. And that I would like to see it change. I'll be a huge fan if they start doing this the right way, but I can't get on board with this shit. Like, I just don't feel like it's good. It's not, and I've presented the
Mm-mm.
case for why it's not.
Yeah,
But yeah, come in and disrupt the Continental Classic and violate the sacred rule that, no one can be at ringside. Or, you know, do like what you said. And it's like, well, technically, we're not at ringside. We've joined you on commentary. And in fact, all they're really doing is waiting for the match to be over to beat the crap out of whoever was in a match with a Death Rider.
look,
And maybe offer
Dumbhead
that
did that.
person an ass whooping. Yeah,
Dumbhead
exactly.
was at commentary,
Yep.
so why couldn't they be there?
So, I mean, this just doesn't seem to be what it needs to be. Um, so yeah, I would love if they want to commit to the Death Riders actually taking over in a style not dissimilar to the NWO WCW takeover, and where you draw these big battle lines and people are either with the Death Riders or against them. And then the Death Riders are everywhere all the time, always lurking in the background. If you have gold, you have a target on your back. If you are standing with Team AEW, you have a target on your back. And they recruit because they need soldiers in this war. That's what I need to see, not four people in a pickup truck in a desert. God damn it. That doesn't tell me anything having to do with anything other than you're trying to sell me like what, an F-150 or some shit.
Oh my god. Oh my god, I'm gonna choke. 4 people
Well, I
in
mean,
the
it just
desert.
isn't. Seriously,
Yeah.
what are you
Yeah,
taking over? You're taking over some sand? Good. Well done. So I need to see that. And I need coherency throughout. I need
Yeah.
to. I think at this point, the only thing I hope for with regards to Adam Cole and MJF, because it's descended so far into absurdity that I've
Yeah,
gotten to where I
yeah.
not only don't care, but I'm avidly like, fuck this crap, is Adam Cole and MJF have it out one last time and they both move the fuck on and run
Yeah.
away from the abomination that this storyline has become. Like,
Please.
it is insalvageable at this point. Just end it and move on. And then the other kind of major story arc would be Tony Storm, Mariah May, because that was a big arc. Like Mariah May and Tony Storm, that was a fantastic arc. And I'm unfortunately feeling like we're finding ourselves not too dissimilar in that the follow up is not able to keep pace with the build up. And Mariah May has repeatedly looked like the only thing, like deliberately at this point, I have to say. At first I thought it was like inadvertent, but now I think it's almost deliberate that like Mariah May, the only thing that's good about her is anything she took from Tony Storm.
Yeah.
Like the match between her and Mina Shirakawa conveyed that quite a lot when she ended up having to hit the Mayday twice and it still didn't get the job done. So her finisher, Mariah's finisher, is garbage.
Yep.
It wasn't until she hit Storm Zero that she was able to get the pin. And so you have overtly stated at this point that Mariah May is nothing without Tony Storm. And it's reinforced by the fact that Tony Storm then comes out. And now it was interesting because, let's face it, Mariah May, Mina Shirakawa, I'll give them credit. They put on a decent match, but nobody thought Mina was going to win.
No.
Because we all at this point realize that Mariah May is in a holding pattern until Storm comes back.
Yeah,
Feels
she's
a little like how Cody is in a holding pattern until his portion of the bloodline comes back.
I actually thought that it reminded me a lot of LA Knight's run, his championship run. Like he needed a competitor that seemed like someone that was threatening. And he didn't get that until Shinsuke Nakamura came back. And took the belt. So I'm hoping that they're just going to continue this little heat between them where it's a back and forth. That's what I'm hoping.
I agree. And I think that was well done, that shocking loss out of nowhere, because everybody was thinking, well, LA Knight is clearly on a push.
Yeah.
You know, and so that belt ain't going anywhere until he gets into a big power feud with someone. I think of all the names on the list, nobody thought Shinsuke Nakamura, at least ways because Shinsuke Nakamura, before he disappeared off television, was putting on stinker matches. Like, it was bad.
Yeah.
And so this repackage of Shinsuke is good. But I digress. I mean, that's for a WWE podcast. I'm just saying, like, I agree with you. That was real good the way that was done. And unfortunately, I feel like Mariah May's run is getting very stale because it really legitimately feels like she's just going to hang on to that belt until Tony Storm inevitably comes back.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that's where this is exactly heading. I mean, it looks like we're heading that way, especially with a returning Tony Storm.
Yep.
So we'll see. I'm not as down on that particular storyline. It's just a little stale. Like Mariah May has like interest as an interesting character. It has diminished significantly without Tony Storm around. And only one or two of the matches have been super significant that she's had. Everything else has just been a burial at Mariah May's feet.
Yeah.
I will say that her and I think it was Anna Jay put on a really good a street fight, I guess, kind of, or anything goes style match.
Yeah.
That was very good. And I will let me take a moment to speak on some of the positive things because this has been a really lengthy bitch session. There's still some things I see in AEW that are good. When the women of recent, have put on kind of anything goes more hardcore style matches, they do a really solid job. I'm referring back to the one that Willow and Statlander put on
Hmm.
not all that long ago when Statlander was still a heel.
Yeah.
And the one recently with Mariah May and Anna Jay, both of those were pretty freaking good matches.
Yeah.
Um, so the women of AEW seem to be able to put on very good street fights, kind of anything goes matches. Those have been very good.
Yeah. I agree.
And I will say, on that particular episode of Dynamite, there were a few diamonds in the rough. Ricochet versus Brody King was an excellent match. It was really good.
Yeah.
I wish I could say Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole in the Dynamite Dozen finals was good. And maybe for me, it's the fact that storyline. Uh, I guess what I'm trying to say here is I'm not sure I looked at it. If I look at it as a fan, I'm biased against it on a couple levels, and let me explain why. One, the storyline is very confused right now, so it's already stupid because of that.
Yeah.
So I'm not coming into it feeling optimistic because it's a dumb storyline. Two, Kyle O'Reilly's style is another one of those striking technical styles, and Adam Cole's is not too far behind. So there wasn't much for me to really be that into. And then third and final, they made a big deal out of MJF showing up for the first time in weeks. And all he did was get out of his car with his back face to us and then show up for 10 seconds in this match to attempt to punch Adam Cole on the apron, only to get super kicked and then run away. So there was a whole lot there that was not great. Not a diamond in the rough. Sorry, I derailed myself on that one. I was trying to talk about good things, but it instead reminded me of a few things that sucked ass. But I said that to say this. If you are into, just for the in-ring, right? Stupid storyline aside, stupid misuse of MJF aside, and that particular style not being my cup of tea, if you take all of those things away, if you're into that style that Garcia and Bryan and Kyle O'Reilly and to a lesser extent Adam Cole are all about, which is heavily leaning on strikes and submissions and technical crap, then you might have enjoyed this match. I didn't. This was a sleepy one for me, but if it's your cup of tea, you might have liked it.
Yeah.
Let's see. And Mariah May and Mina Shirakawa put on a good match. I think I said that. So I think those are the two highlights, really, was Ricochet and Brody King and Mina and Mariah putting on decent matches. I would love to say that Will Ospreay put on another banger. And for his part, I feel like Ospreay did, because Ospreay did what Ospreay does. But Castagnoli just got stuck in a Mobius loop where all he could do was arm flappies and uppercuts for like the most of it. And so for his half of the match, Claudia was boring as shit.
Flappies.
Um, I suppose the Moxley Pack match
Mm.
against Jay White and
Nope.
Orange Cassidy wasn't terrible.
Mm.
But it's also plagued by the stupid storyline and the Death Riders, and it felt largely like this was less of a match about its own sake and more of a match to get us to a fatal four-way at World's End, which is what it resulted in.
Yep.
Outside of the actual matches, there were a couple of things that were pretty good. There was a video package featuring Bandito,
Man, those have been bomb. Those have been so good.
That was so good. Like, I'm amazed at how good it was, because it was basically like a whole bunch of Wild West bounty hunters are trying to catch Bandito, who is wanted and has a bounty on his head. And Bandito shows up and it's snowing, right? It's snowing in the Wild West. And Bandito has like no shirt on.
Hey,
I'm thinking, man, my dude is freezing.
Bandito makes his own heat.
Bandito does make his own heat, and Bandito kicked the crap out of all of the bounty hunters as part of this video package. That was excellent, right?
Yeah,
That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, where it's like there's an unpolished diamond here. And so we end up with this really wildly inconsistent show that can have peaks that rival Mount Everest, but valleys that like go deeper to straight to hell than the Grand Canyon.
Mariana's Trench.
Yes, yeah, you get it. And so this Bandito video package was amazeballs.
Yeah.
So I have to give a lot of props for that. That was excellent. More of that, please. And despite the fact that there was a portion where Christian took the mic because he was sitting in the skybox and addressing all the people, his promo was not great. One, he literally plagiarized the same exact promo that like happened on, I want to say it was on Raw, as a matter of fact, where Gunter had told the Judgment Day that I am literally and figuratively looking down on you. He lifted that word for word.
Yes.
And for anybody who watches wrestling, and not just one team or the other, but you watch pro wrestling, at least on the major shows, you've seen that. You would call that out immediately. So he straight lifted that from Gunter, and then proceeded to stumble over his words like 3 or 4 times, and then tried to tell the audience to shut up, like it was their fault that he couldn't spit out what he was trying to say. So that wasn't great, but what followed was pretty excellent, which was a brawl in the skybox between Christian and Hook, where Hook was taking it to him, and he had dismissed or sent away Nick Wayne and Kip Sabian. So it took so for a while, Hook got to beat the bejesus out of Christian, and it was fantastic. And then Kip Sabian and Wayne show up, and Hook proceeds to beat the hell shit out of both of them before leaving, running after Cage, who had run off like a scared little girl. It was beautiful. That was a wonderful spot. It was excellent. More of that, please.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pick out any more golden nuggets. I don't know. Depending on how you like Jericho, you might have thought his New York Minute was pretty funny. And you might also be wondering who the hell Matt Cardona is.
Who?
Yeah, we know who he is, but most people would probably be like, "Who's that?
Who is Matt? Listen, who the hell is Matt Cardona? I'm just kidding.
You'd have to ask Chelsea Green.
She knows. Wow.
Exactly. Let's see. I know that Private Party pretty much interceded in a fight-ish sort of promo between Action Andretti and Leo Rush versus Top Flight. It was okay. I mean, it was what it was. It didn't blow my mind, but it wasn't terrible either.
Yeah.
And I think that's about it. Yeah, on the whole, I was not super impressed. There were a couple of high spots, but the valleys are really looking deep these days, and it's making it difficult because, like, I know I don't want to just get on here. I didn't get into wanting to do a podcast where I am trying to hate on this thing and give it nothing but criticisms and just bitch and bitch. I know that's very popular on the internet. I know you can get a lot of subs feeding into hate, but that ain't my bag. So it makes it very difficult. And I feel very disappointed that I end up feeling let down by AEW on several of these fronts because I know they can be better than this.
Yeah. Yeah. You hate to see it.
Yeah. So, that said, as we move into the holidays and real life has some stuff coming up, top tier coverage of AEW might be inconsistent at best. I find it very difficult to be able to hop on here and podcast where all I'm going to do is complain, and
Yeah.
that's largely the way I'm feeling about AEW right at the moment. Now, I say that fully aware that there's only about like 9 people that ever watch any of our AEW content, but for those 9 people, just understand we'll keep watching AEW, but until we really have something good to report, our podcast might be centered around WWE product for the foreseeable future, until such a time as we feel like we can podcast something good and not
Yeah.
just be bitching about how bad the storylines are or the ways in which the in-ring is deteriorating. Because I don't want to join the hate AEW crowd. They've got enough of that going on in the world. So
Yeah.
once we feel like we've got something really positive to say, you'll probably only be catching podcasts about WWE. Because as of late, they've been on fire. They have been killing it over there. And if anyone who's affiliated with AEW happens to listen to these podcasts, I hope you take to heart. I'm only giving you my opinion, and Dawn is as well, as fans of a product. We've never been producers, we've never been bookers, we've never run a pro wrestling show, but we do know what we like and what works for us as the consumers of this product. And so I hope some of these criticisms, I know we can get heated and vitriolic, but that's just because we're really into pro wrestling, right?
Mhm.
All of it is said with the intent that we hope AEW can polish the diamond that we know is there and that it gets better, because we want to be able to hop on here and talk about, wow, my mind was blown about this match, or wow, this promo like Banditos was fucking amazing. I
Yeah.
don't want to get on here and just have to incessantly bitch about how your storylines are so incoherent. Even I can't get on board, or that, the in-ring action is now suffering because you're putting on these matches that go way too long and do just the same move over and over and over and over and over ad nauseum. Um, that's not interesting. It's not interesting to us. Maybe there's somebody out there listening that finds it interesting, but we don't find it interesting.
Yeah.
And certainly not worth taking the time out of our busy schedules to make a podcast that's going to basically be that. And this, unfortunately, this particular episode of Dynamite top tier kind of coverage was more obligatory. We felt like we've been covering Dynamite, so we should cover Dynamite. And that's when we sort of realized maybe we shouldn't. Because this is a passion of ours. And if it feels obligatory or that we're doing it just because we've been doing it, that ain't the right motivation. And like I
Yeah.
said, I ain't trying to just sit here and spew negativity. I write in the descriptor that this is our discussion, our analysis, and our opinions as pro wrestling super fans. This is a thing we love. So, and I'm not trying to cash in on hate views. Not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
So for the next little while, until we see something that blows our wigs back coming out of AEW, our coverage of AEW will probably be threadbare to non-existent, just to let people know. That said, I want to thank everybody who joined us on this episode. And I hope you will join us for our next episode, which should be our coverage of WWE SmackDown. And then following that, we will most likely cover Saturday Night Main Event, which I believe is this weekend. And then after that, we will cover Monday Night Raw. Until then, I don't think there's much left for me to do but roll the outro.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Top Tier Wrestling. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the latest AEW and WWE news and shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Follow us on social media for updates and to join the conversation. Until next time, everyone, remember, wrestling is always better when it's top tier.